Okay, Norm, where were you born?
I was born in my father's farm in Raymondville, Missouri.
Raymondville, Missouri. Now, Raymondville, where was that near?
Well, the county was Texas County,
Okay.
and the county seat was Houston. It was named after Sam Houston, who lived there a while before he moved on to Texas. Texas County is the largest county in Missouri. And my father's farm actually really belonged to my grandfather. He was a gentleman farmer. He always liked to have a farm he would spend his weekends visiting the farm. He had a farmer to take care of the place. And my father, as a child, spent a lot of time there and learned to like farming. So when he got out of high school, he moved to the farm and actually did the farming. And so my grandfather eventually gave my father the farm.
Okay, so you were born in a farmhouse?
Yes,
Okay. And Raymondville, how far away from Houston is that?
6 miles.
And do you have much memory of when you were in Raymondville?
Yes, I have vivid memory of life on that farm. I remember specifically there was a rather large spring near the house, and the water flowed from the spring through a little brook. I'm not sure where the brook emptied to, but I used to, as a little kid, build water wheels that were powered by the water in the brook. That was a vivid memory. Also remember walking in the woods to I'm not sure which direction, let me think here. It would have been to the west of the house, and there was an old abandoned car. And it was the car that my father and mother used on their honeymoon. And so after the car wore out, it was parked at the back edge of the property, and I wonder if it's still there.
What kind of car was it?
Don't know. It's a brand name that I don't remember the name of, but it was not made very long. Back in the early days of the automobile, there were lots of different manufacturers or different people would build cars, and they were either acquired by the consolidated and became part of a bigger company, or went out of business eventually.
Right, like Dusseldorf or all these different things.
Exactly.
Or like Fisher Body Works was actually a car, right? Like if you look at Fisher.
Yes, Fisher, Body by Fisher.
Yeah.
It was part of General Motors. Yes.
But was Fisher a car then originally?
I don't know.
Okay, and you were born what year? Just to give some
September
perspective on
30, 1936.
Okay, and so what's your earliest memories when you were how old? 4 or 5 or?
I remember my first memory was at Dr. Dillman's office in Houston. My mother took me there for shots as a little kid, and I remember when the syringes then were very big and the needles were very large, and I remember being stuck by that big syringe and needle. It was a very frightening experience. I also remember, in fact, preceding that memory probably is my first encounter with a black man. My father's Bill Dickey, the catcher for the Yankees, a very well-known catcher for the Yankees, was a quail hunter, and my father knew Bill Dickey, and after a baseball season was over, Bill Dickey would come to the farm to bird hunt with my father. And Dickey would bring along a large black man who would carry handle the dogs, the hunting dogs, and the rifles, or the shotguns, excuse me. And I remember I was in my playpen, and the black man came in the house, and he came over to the crib and looked at me, and I remember how black he was and his big white teeth. So that was probably my first memory that even predates the Dr. Dillman experience in Houston.
And you moved at a pretty early age from Missouri to Colorado.
It's very interesting. My father was a fan of reading Western novels. Zane Grey was his favorite author.
Okay.
So he became interested in the West, particularly in cattle ranching. So he decided to sell his farm and move to Colorado and buy a cattle ranch. So he sold the farm in the fall of 1942.
And how old would he have been in 1942?
Well, he was born in 1906, so he would have been 36.
Okay. And so you would have been a super young 6 years old not even 6 when you left Missouri?
That is right. I'd been 6 years old when I left Missouri.
Well, did you leave in the fall or did you leave in the spring?
Left in, I think we left in February.
Okay, so you would have been 5 in a few months.
Been 6 in a few months. And in any event, no, actually I would have been 7 in a few months.
Well, then you would have, no?
Yes, I would have been
If you're
7.
born in 36, 37 is 1, 38 is 2, 39 is 3, 40 is 4.
42 would have been 6.
Yeah, but you have to get to September to be 6.
No, I was 6 in 1942.
Right. So if you left in February...
43.
Okay.
43.
So you left in 43?
Yes.
Okay, so this is why we asked
So
the question.
February of 43.
This is why we badger the jurists to make sure we get the right story.
In any event, we took the train. I don't know where we caught the train. Maybe in Kabul, Missouri.
So February of 43?
February 43.
So you sold the farm?
No. The farm was sold in late 1942.
Okay, hang on 1 second. You can continue.
And we went to, probably from Kabul to Kansas City, and got off the train in Kansas City and spent the night at a hotel. I know it was very cold and windy, and I have very vivid memories of that.
And so how hard was it to stay in a hotel in another place and during the war?
I don't remember those details.
So you rode in a car?
No, it went from Kabul, which was not far from Houston. took the train from Kabul to Kansas City, spent the night at a hotel, and then rode by train, got on a train the next day to go to Colorado.
And was your grandfather at the time, was he happy about this?
Not happy at all.
Okay. So this is your wayward...
He didn't protest, but he was obviously not happy because he had given my father the farm, and then he farmed it for a few years and sold it.
Right, and so your grandfather lost the use of the farm and...
Well, he didn't. Of course, he liked to come to the farm, just to as a recreational kind of thing.
Sure. But it was the family land.
It was family land, and obviously, his son and his daughter-in-law and 2 children were close by.
Yeah.
So he didn't see them much anymore.
So you saw your grandfather a lot when you were growing up?
Oh, it's very interesting. Let's go on that path for a minute. My grandfather, I would call him an Abraham Lincoln attorney. Attorneys at that period of time did not go to law school. They read law books and then took an exam to become an attorney. So that's how my grandfather became an attorney.
So what did he do when he was younger before he became an attorney? Did he became an attorney right out of the box, or?
I think right out of the box. And he got involved. He was very active in the Republican Party, political party. In fact, he was back in those days for presidential elections, there was a campaign manager appointed for a certain section of the country. So my grandfather Smallwood was William McKinley's campaign manager for western Missouri and Kansas and perhaps part of Nebraska. So he would actually give stump speeches go to various towns through that area and give stump speeches for McKinley. But now, going back to being an attorney, he early on in his role as an attorney got involved with founding of farmer cooperatives. This is where farmers would form an association where they would use the association to buy inputs for their farms, like seed and fertilizer and maybe even farm implements to some degree. And then they would also have build silos for storing grain, and they would also be marketing agents for their farm production. So my father spent a lot of time in Kansas City.
Your grandfather.
My grandfather spent a lot of time in Kansas City. In fact, spent several years there involved in the farmer cooperative, starting farmer cooperatives and managing farmer cooperatives for a period of time.
And so there was always probably contentious, because you've got all these guys with their whole life work tied up in their business, and they're pooling their resources to get a bigger voice in better markets. And so probably managing those things, you have to deal with a lot of personalities and a lot of things like that.
It was a very difficult time because farmers are very independent people. And when you farm a cooperative, you've got to be kind of a team player, and that was always very frustrating to get farmers to agree on certain matters. The membership would not always agree. Anyway, at some point in time, I don't remember the date, my grandfather was just kind of stressed out after years of this involvement, and he had an opportunity to become the postmaster in Raymondville. So he became the postmaster, and he became also the town, the city judge. So he was the city judge and the postmaster. And my grandfather was a very highly respected member of the community. By the way, his brother, I think it was Henry Smallwood, owned the bank in Raymondville. So he was, in fact, he was a fairly wealthy guy. My grandfather Smallwood was reasonably, in other words, as a lawyer practicing in those periods, he always lived comfortably, and had money to have a nice house and buy a farm and lived well. My grandfather Smallwood was also very active in the Methodist Church. In fact, he was one of the, he was a deacon. Maybe he'd been the managing deacon of the church in Raymondville. By the way, that church was the construction of it was financed by William Tecumseh Ship, who was my grandmother Smallwood's brother, who was very wealthy in the, he had throughout Missouri and southern Missouri and west and northern Arkansas, had a lot of sawmills and lumber yards. And so he financed the church, building the church in Raymondville, which frankly still stands and is still maintained in quite good condition.
So the church you were baptized in,
Yes, is still there.
the Methodist church,
Yes.
you would have been baptized when you were a baby, or did
Yes.
they wait till you were later? As a
I'm
Methodist?
sure as a baby.
Okay.
Anyway, of course, I don't remember that. Any event.
Okay, so just super briefly, your grandfather Smallwood, the lawyer, postmaster, judge. He had how many children?
He had 4 children. His wife was Emma Ship Smallwood, and the oldest daughter was. Let me think here for a minute. I haven't used her name for so long that I've forgotten.
You know when she was born? What year?
No, I have no idea. Let's skip her for a minute and talk about the sequence of daughters. Opal was her name. Opal. She married a fellow named of Zeck, Z-E-C-K.
And was she around when you were a kid?
She was.
Okay.
Very nice person.
So there was Aunt Opal.
Aunt Opal, and then the next daughter was Aunt Edith.
Okay, now Edith you remember better.
Yes. And let's talk about Edith just a minute. Let me finish. Then my father was the third member of the family. Then the youngest member of the family was Grace, another daughter. So let's now talk about Aunt Opal's husband, the Zeck, was a mechanic, and he worked in the oil well business in Texas. He was, in fact, the oil wells, the pumps were steam driven at that time, and he was an expert in rebuilding or repairing steam pumps. He had his own garage where he did repair work on trucks and cars, and he built model operable little steam engines in his spare time. That was his hobby. I have no idea what happened to those, that they were absolutely fascinating. He would power them, he'd hook up compressed air to them to run and to show me how they worked. As a child, I remember that very vividly.
Now, at some point you moved back to Missouri, right? And I don't want to jump ahead, but you have conflicting memories, right? You moved to Colorado and then you moved back to Missouri.
Oh, no, never moved back to Missouri.
You never moved back?
No.
Okay, well then I have that wrong.
No.
Okay. Sorry.
So any event...
Did you go back as a child then?
Oh, we go back and visit maybe every couple of years.
Say hello, Jupiter.
When we would go back to visit, we would go by train. By the way,
Would you go back in the wintertime then?
No, we go back in the summer. Summer or fall.
Okay.
Let's go back now when we took the train from Kansas City to Colorado. Of course, you can't you go through Kansas, which is flat, at night.
Hey, buddy, do you know how to turn it off? Because Grandpa's talking. Can we turn it off? Sky Jupiter, buddy, can you turn it off for Daddy? Can you turn that? Can you bring me 2 glasses of ice water? This one and one more, baby.
I'm busy, Rick.
Okay.
So anyway, the train from Kansas City to Denver was a night. It was at night, and in those days during World War II, trains were absolutely packed, and most of the passengers were military personnel. And it was so packed, the men actually stood, and women and children were given seats. And I remember that night I slept on the lap of a soldier. A soldier volunteered to hold me on his lap.
So he could sit down.
My father stood up because he gave the seat to the soldiers.
Right.
And so I slept in the lap of a soldier that night. Anyway, got to Denver, and then we took the train from Denver to Glenwood Springs. And that was during the daylight. And of course, got my first view of mountains. And of course, in February, it was very snowy, and we went by Camp Hale, where the soldiers who learned how to ski. They were the mountain division.
Right, the 10th Mountain Division.
I guess the 10th Mountain.
And they
Division.
still rent out in Colorado. They still rent out the cabins. Did you know that? Like there's an association, and they rent out these cabins. They're World War II cabins that they maintain.
Well, Camp Hale has all been torn down. The foundations are still
No.
visible.
All over the state of Colorado.
Oh, really?
They have these 10th Mountain Division cabins where they go do their mountain training.
Okay.
And you can get on a list, and it's a lottery system.
Anyway, Camp Hale was located.
God, Jupiter, Daddy's busy with that Grandpa.
Camp Hale was between near Leadville, but somewhat between Leadville and Minturn, Colorado.
Okay.
And as the train went by Camp Hale, here are all these barracks and here are all these soldiers skiing around, and I'd never seen anyone on skis before. It was very fascinating to see. Well, first of all, seeing the mountains and seeing the snow on the mountains and seeing these skiers. I remember that very vividly. And it was really quite an exciting train trip from Denver to Glenwood Springs.
Right, and it's kind of interesting. You have a whole division of troops up here in the middle of Colorado doing training, and these are the same guys I think they fought in Italy.
In Italy?
The 10th Mountain Division, didn't they go to Italy?
I think so.
Like Montecasino or something along those lines. But
Sure.
Sure, I mean, it's pretty fascinating when you sit there and you think about the history of it all in that time. You've got a whole division of guys in a place that normally wouldn't have anybody.
Exactly. In fact, it was built from scratch at the beginning. Camp Hale was just a wilderness area.
You want a what? What do you want? A red one what? Careful, Joseph Maceo. Careful, buddy. Daddy's doing a videotape of Grandpa. We have a videotape of Mommy's daddy too. Okay?
I want to eat.
You want to eat? I think you want to go climbing.
In the event,
so you went to Glenwood Springs.
went to Glenwood Springs.
And what time would you arrive at Glenwood Springs?
It was probably mid to late afternoon.
And did the train stop at Camp Hale and a bunch of guys get off?
Don't think so.
Okay.
Don't think it stopped at Camp Hale. Don't remember it stopping.
So this would have been an express train or something.
Yes.
And Glenwood Springs would have been the first big stop west of Denver, right?
In fact, if I recall, it was the only stop. But I don't. Again, my memory is very
Right. Well, it'd be tough to say.
very not vivid on that point. Anyway, we stayed at a hotel. We lived for several days at a hotel in Glenwood Springs. Now, my father had no experience in cattle ranching, and he decided he wanted to work for a cattle rancher for about a year or for several months to learn the cattle ranching business before he bought his own ranch.
Okay.
And somehow he became connected to a rancher on East Divide Creek by the name of Paul Jessup. And Paul's wife's name was Mary. same as my mother. And anyway, they had no children. They were just a very noble couple. And somehow my father got connected, and so my father agreed to work for Paul Jessup on East Divide Creek.
Right, and manpower had to be kind of limited at
Oh,
this time, right?
during World War II, manpower was a precious, it was a real shortage.
So when he showed up in Glenwood Springs, he asks around and he finds...
I'm sure I don't know the details,
Right.
but I'm sure that's how it happened.
Okay.
So anyway, and by the way, our furniture, some of our furniture,
Have you drank that?
oh no, some of our furniture,
I'm a little worried because I have a sinus thing going on.
some of our furniture was shipped by train,
Right.
and then my father also bought whatever furniture was lacking in furniture stores in Glenwood.
Mm-hmm.
So when we moved, the Jessup Ranch had the main ranch house, and then there was another house on the property, which used to be called the Raven Post Office. There was a post office,
Okay, now the ranch was where?
East Divide Creek.
Well, okay, tell me where that is in relation to Glenwood Springs.
You take what is now Interstate 70
West?
west.
And how far?
You go down to Silt,
Okay, I know Silt.
and you would then take, if you're heading west on 70, you would take a left and go, let's see,
South.
go south
Right.
for maybe 10 miles or so to the Jessup Ranch up East Divide Creek.
Okay.
There, in fact, from Silt west, there's East Divide Creek and West Divide Creek.
Okay.
So,
West Divide Creek.
so this ranch was on East Divide Creek.
East Divide Creek.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. And anyway, when the truck came to deliver the furniture to the house, there was a bridge across the creek, East Divide Creek, and the bridge collapsed. So now the truck didn't turn over, but here's the truck on the bridge, and it collapsed down, and the truck was in the creek with the things on board. So the furniture had to be taken off and carried out of the creek
Wow.
onto a wagon,
Wow.
and then hauled. There was a kind of a steep road up the hill where the house was.
Right.
And as long as we lived there, that bridge was never fixed.
Really?
Right.
Wow.
So we had to drive the car. My father bought a car in Glenwood. So we had to leave the car on the other side of the creek and walk. You could still cross the bridge, but
Right.
it just broke in the middle.
Yeah.
And it was still out of the water. It was, in fact, maybe the bottom was in the water, but my father made some boards across the water so you could have a little walkway and not get wet.
Right.
So that's how it was maybe total half mile. We had to walk from the broken bridge to the house. Now, it's interesting, in the summer, my sister and I would fish in the little creek. Never caught any fish, but we'd always try. But right next to the road where the bridge was, somebody had started to build a tunnel. There was kind of a cliff there. Somebody had started a tunnel, and there was an old pick there. So typically, I'd get tired of fishing while my sister was fishing, and I would take the pick and work on the tunnel. It only went into the side of the hill maybe 3 or 4 feet. It was not much of a tunnel, but somebody had definitely started, and it was all. It was not, it was not ore. It was river deposited round rocks and silt and a little clay. So I don't.
So you could dig.
I'm not sure. Maybe a child started doing this, or some
Right.
teenagers started doing it at some point in time. But one of the interesting things about the house, there was a room right at the front door, just when you went to the front door, like the foyer. There was a little room which was the post office. It was, in other words, the post office is no longer in existence, but it had been the post office. So in the little room, there were all these little bins for the mail, and there was a little counter, and so that was my playroom. So I enjoyed playing in the little old post office.
And how long were you in this house?
Okay, we moved there in late February.
1943.
Right. And my father then bought a ranch on Woody Creek, I think in December of 1943.
Okay.
And so we lived there from late February to early December.
So when you bought the ranch, or when he bought the ranch in Aspen, or Woody Creek, as you want to call it, there was a house.
Oh yes.
There was a house already there.
Yes. Actually, I'm really not accurate here. What my father initially did, he leased the ranch.
Okay.
Then he later bought it. Okay. So the owners, Margaret, a widow by the name of Margaret Arlene, had two children, Lena and Leo. Leo was the son, oldest child, and Lena was perhaps 2 years younger than Leo. Leo is now dead. Lena is still alive, lives in Elgibel, Colorado. I visit Lena. She's a good friend. In fact, I've got to write her a letter. I'm way behind, and she corresponds, and I haven't written back recently. Any event, on the house was was two houses. The original ranch house, which was a log house, but it had siding, white siding on it had been upgraded, and siding on the sides. But there was a newer log house down closer to Woody Creek, about maybe 100 yards from Woody Creek, kind of on a bluff, and right down at the bottom of the bluff. It wasn't on a steep bluff, but maybe 50-foot elevation difference, was the Woody Creek channel. So
you're way ahead of where I want to be right now because it's football time.
Okay.
So do you want to talk about East Divide Creek anymore?
No, that's well. I can talk about the. Of course, during the summer of 1943, Paul Jessup had a lot of horses, and we had access to the horses. My sister and I spent a lot of time horseback riding. We rode bareback, and it was a very interesting ranch. There was a lot of good farmland, but a lot of kind of little mini mountain ranges running through the ranch. So, and a lot of big boulders, and so it was really lots of fun riding around that ranch. It was a new experience for us, of course.
Do you know how much acreage there was?
Oh, there's several hundred acres this ranch.
And do you remember how big the farm was in Missouri that your father sold?
It was several hundred acres.
And when he farmed there, he farmed corn?
Corn, and he actually grew soybeans.
Which would be early for
one of the first soybean farmers, and yes, he experimented in soybeans. Growing oats and wheat and corn, and he had cattle. He also had chicken houses, and he grew chickens. Are we going to stop for the game?
Yeah, we're going to stop for the game.
Okay.
That's okay with everyone involved. Thanks very much. Today is December 23rd, 2012. Correct?
It is 23rd, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
It was so funny. When on Facebook last night, my good friend who owns this company that I am the outside director for, Tom Douglas, his wife posted, "Would you believe my husband didn't remember when Christmas was, he had to ask me, what day is Christmas? And what was funny, 20 minutes before I read this on Facebook, I called Mary Kay to give her an update, and I said, by the way, when is Christmas? So I wrote Kim and said, Tom and I must, she said, I don't know what planet he's on. I said, Tom and I must be on the same planet, because I just asked my wife 20 minutes ago, when is Christmas?
The joys of senility.